So we should be live in the not too distant future. So we'll give ourselves a few seconds. Hey everybody, if you're already watching in, we'll kick off in 2 seconds, but you should be able to watch us on Twitter and YouTube. So let's see how we're going with the audience out there.
Got the notification. Cool.
All right. Welcome everybody to Azure User Group for Sydney for February 2021. The three of us are here this evening, so I'll be on later talking about Azure Logic Apps. Arafat's also here, watching out for comments, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to chuck them in the comments either on the YouTube channel or you'll be able to post them in Twitter, and we'll keep an eye on the Twitter handle as well. So I'm going to say goodbye. Arafat, give everyone a wave, and we'll give Sammy space to kick things off. So see you all later.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first meetup of 2021. So we are so excited coming back to the community and having you with us here this evening. Thanks again for joining us. Let's kick off this month's slide. As you can see, we are broadcasting live using new technology and new tools. So feel free to reach out in the Twitter or even in the chat, as Simon mentioned, with any questions, any comments, or anything. And we would like also your feedback at the end of the session to see, based on this new experience, we are going. So we are going with the. Hang on, let me go back to my slide. Yeah, and looks like I cannot go to the next slide. I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah, all right. So the usual agenda which we have for our meetup. So we are starting with introducing the upcoming events and what's happening in the community. Then we go with the Azure news, and then we will have the Simon to talk about the new experience with the Azure Logic Apps or ACA and Logic Apps v2. Not that much happening in terms of the events, but one of the very major events happening this month, next week, we are having the Microsoft Ignites happening for 3 days. And so if look at the address, go to that address. If it's completely online, so the agenda for the event is already established at that link, so you can register. You need to register, and then you can use that event online completely for free for 3 days with awesome sessions. If you go and check the agenda and the session titles, they are pretty good. I'm Sam Alavi. I'm a managing consultant at the moment with Telstra Purple. And let's switch over to some Azure news. And since last time we met, there has been lots happening inside the Azure platform, and from mid-December and January and February, even the product teams were quite busy announcing a bunch of things. Couple of things in public preview, couple of things in private preview also, which is not available publicly, and a couple of things in the GA. With the public preview, if we want to start with the public preview, basically Azure Front Door has added a new SKU as a premium. So the Azure Front Door service is already available, but they added they basically added 2 new pricing to a standard, which is the existing one, and the premium one, and also they support the WAF. And if you know, Azure Front Door is a secure cloud CDN solution with load balancing and a couple of other features, which can be used by the cybersecurity teams to accelerate the content delivery to the applications, APIs, websites, or any other type of the workload that needs to be exposed publicly. And it has the intelligent threat protection inside that. And now with the WAF policy support. It comes to the standard and premium support as well. At the moment, the standard WAF support is only for the custom WAF rules, which you can define. But with the new WAF supports they are adding to the Azure front door, specifically for the premium, you can go with the managed rule sets for your WAF, or you can go with the standard rule sets, or you can go with your custom rule sets as the existing one. Then Application Insight got bunch of features announced in the preview. So we picked these two for here, and there are a few others in the GA. So work item integration with the GitHub and DevOps is in preview now. We had this feature in the with the Azure DevOps before, but they added the GitHub functionality and enhanced the whole experience as whole. And basically, we can use that for capturing the context of performance issues or any failure happening within the application, and have that data available in the work item and create a GitHub issue or Azure DevOps work items based on those information available for the teams for more in-depth investigation based on those data. That's already that's also support for .NET 5 is made available in the preview. So if you have any .NET 5 applications hosted in the app services, you can use Application Insight integration out of the box, and all the features are available also. API management diagnostics is a new thing they announced in the public preview, and basically it's a new diagnostic service added to the API management instances, which adds and gives us a new set of features to identify and address any key issues with the APIs, with the configurations, and anything wrong within the workload inside the API management. That this set of features will help us to identify and mitigate those issues. Even if there are some performance issues with the APIs, for example, we can use these set of features to identify the bottleneck in the APIs and improve in terms of the performance. Cognitive services, bunch of new language added to the whole set of services available as the cognitive services family. So as you can see with the language APIs with version 3.2, now it's supporting 73 languages. Azure Storage also got two. One is for basically resource instance rules. Resource instance rules is a new feature in preview for Azure Storage, and basically it enables you to restrict and protect the access to the Azure Storage only for a specific set of Azure services. Not all the customers or all the workloads requires to protect the Azure storage, for example, with the private link in the VNet. So this way is another way of securing access to the Azure storage with restricting to a specific Azure services. For example, if you want to restrict with the app service access to storage or Azure Functions, we can do that now without having a private link or protecting within the VNet everything privately. Another feature in the preview for storage is prevent SaaS authorization. As you know, we got two different methods for basically authorizing the access to the storage is using and integrating with the Azure Active Directory, or we can use the shared keys or the SaaS authorization. With this new feature, this feature is added for the clients which they want to stick only with, for example, Azure Active Directory, the most secure way comparing to the shared key. And if you want to disable that SaaS authorization, now we have that feature in the preview, and we can disable the shared access authorization to the storage account and only available with the Azure Active Directory authentication. Let's move to next for public preview. Yep. Azure, as you can see, the first one is the Python support in the Azure Functions for 3.9, and Node 14 supports are added to the Azure Functions with the runtime version 3, both available in the Linux and Windows base. AKS automatic cluster upgrades is a new cool feature also added to the AKS managed Kubernetes clusters available in the Azure platform. And basically with this feature, you can customize how you want to auto upgrade your cluster. Auto upgrade means you can customize the upgrade path and basically tell the platform to do the auto upgrade for you in terms of, for example, to go to latest a stable miner or update automatically to latest rapid miner if it's available in that region which your cluster is deployed, which basically minimize your manual effort in terms of tracking the cluster and upgrading the cluster manually. So that's another feature added to the managed part of the Kubernetes within the Azure. Azure Container Registry got the availability zone support, which now you can benefit from the availability zone features for the container registry also. Azure Automation Account supports for Python 3 runbook. Currently, we have the Python version 2 and PowerShell. So now with this Python 3 runbook, we can import, alter, and run Python 3 runbook inside Azure Automation Account. App service version 3 basically is referring to as a new service plan for isolated version 2. And basically, it's a simplified version of app service environment, the previous version, but very simplified in terms of networking and infrastructure deployment and configuration. By the mean that we don't need to worry about the networking side of the things, and we deploy this app service environment into a managed VNet, basically Azure managed virtual network, and it minimizes the networking configuration, for example, peering or any other stuff which requires for the app service environment to hook into the network. And also they remove the stamp fee from this specific pricing offer. And by that means we can achieve up to 75%, depends on the hosting version you choose, up to 75% saving in terms of the cost per instance for this new pricing tier with App Service Environment version 3. Azure Logic Apps version 2, which is the topic for the main session, and I will leave it completely to the Simon to talk us through about that one. And let's move to GA. For the GA part, basically the pick by us is digital twins, as you can see first in the list. So digital twins, as you know, is a managed platform inside the Azure, and it's designed and built for simplifying and accelerating the creation of IoT connected systems. And it offers a comprehensive set of features in that IoT space. And for those IoT connected systems, it's now completely GA, completely available. That means you can use it for the production, and it's also enterprise ready and ready to use even at the enterprise grade. Azure Cognitive Services also got a few things GA, similar to that preview one. A bunch of language supports added to the translators API. For example, like Armenian, Azeri, or Nepali, or Myanmar, and few other languages added to the translator API. Text analytics, name entity recognition also got added with the more language support. One of the big announcements happened this month is this Azure Service Bus Java Message Service, or JMS2 API supports, but it's only available in the premium tier of the Service Bus. So let's say if you have any Java application or a Spring application which are using the JMS version 2 API to communicate and work with any on-prem message broker. So by this feature, it enables you to migrate your workload completely into the Azure, seamlessly, and that means you only need to do some code configuration changes, and by that you get the full support in terms of that messaging and message broker from the Azure Service Bus Premium tier. And that's a good push and basically great effort in terms of enabling Java application and Java workloads to come and basically be hosted inside the Azure platform. That's a really, really great effort moving forward in terms of even shift and lift the workloads into the Azure platform. That's the biggest step moving forward in that Java space. Application Insights also got a new reporting template, which is an enhanced template with adding a bunch of other data and basically made a few other extra data from availability or web test availability test result into that template for generating a new SLA template for your availability. It's added to the Application Insight. Cosmos DB got two announcements in the GA. For first one is using the composite index updates, and that one is for another feature in terms of improving the performance and tuning the queries for a better result and efficiency inside the Kubernetes. And by that mean we can use and combine the system functions and queries, mix them with the queries for a better aggregate and filter expressions, which at the end will result in improving the queries inside the Cosmos DB. Now it's available in GA and can be used with all the system functions and system expressions. And similar, if you are from data world, definitely you are familiar with the like keyboard support. So like clause is also available in GA for Cosmos DB queries, in Cosmos DB queries. And we can, similar to the T-SQL, we can use the like keyboard in Cosmos DB queries. The rest of announcement in the GA space is one of the important one is the key vault references got some changes in for the Azure Functions and app services also, which that means we don't need to specify the version part of the reference for all the Azure secrets, keys, and certificates. And by default, Azure platform will monitor that one, those values based on the latest version available. And if any update happens to any of those secret keys or certificate, it automatically updates the Azure Function and Azure app services for us. So we don't need to track the version with by that. In the Azure Functions, RabbitMQ triggers and bindings are available and GA for use. For example, if you have a RabbitMQ message broker installed or hosted in a VM inside the Azure, now we can, with this extension in GA, we can use that one to basically work with RabbitMQ queue messages for triggers and even for the output binding for Azure Functions. Another one, which is a big one, again, is Azure Function is the custom handlers. With custom handler means you can build your own handler for Azure Functions for triggers or even for with your favorite language of runtime. For example, you can use Go, or a couple of language supports are added already, and many more are coming also. You can use Go or PHP to define your own trigger and then host it and use it inside the Azure Functions. Java and Linux function support is added, and by that means you can build your Azure Function apps with Java version 8 and Java version 11, but only on the Linux hosting available. It's available for all the premium and dedicated and consumption plans, but as I said, only for the Linux hosting available. Azure Database for MySQL stop-start server feature is added, so that's a great feature for stopping and starting MySQL database servers for example, for the time you don't want to use that one. Let's say you have instances in your Azure Dev Test subscription and you want to stop and start in non-working hours. So that feature is a good and very helpful feature in terms of the cost saving in your Azure Dev Test subscription, or even in any appropriate workload, which this is applicable to. API management certificate storing Key Vault is added and supported. It's now available in GA. And by that mean, we can store a bunch of certificates in the Key Vault, and rather than uploading directly into the API management instance, we can reference them from the Key Vault. And one of the big benefits is we can share those certificates between different services. For example, rather than API management, you want to use the same certificates with another app service. So that feature is available, and plus all of the features of certificates which we get from the Key Vault, they are all available, and particular type of certificates are already supported by API management for this. For example, client certificates, we can use and store that one and use it within the API management. Certificate to authenticate, client certificate for authentication, or certificates for authenticating the API request for self-hosted gateway is also available and can be used and stored and consumed from the Key Vault. And last one, Oracle WebLogic support is added, and it's GA inside the Azure Managed Clusters. That means if you have any applications already which requires WebLogic server for hosting, you can now bring that and migrate that workload completely into the AKS and bring it into that managed Kubernetes cluster inside the Microsoft Azure platform. So that's it. We have listed a bunch of deprecation also. I won't go through that one, conscious of the time, for in 2-3 minutes to hand over to Simon. So let's read it through from the slides, and feel free to raise a question if you have, and we can talk about that one if it's required. Then, but conscious of all those times and timelines specified for each of them. For example, if you have any app service with Python 3.6, you need to know that they will be retired and there won't be any support by the end of this year, and similar to all other items. Yeah, have a look through, and yeah, if there is any specific question, please let us know.
I think the big change for me, Sam, is the Kubernetes one, because it's not really a deprecation per se. So if you've been using AKS with older versions of Kubernetes, so if you're pre 1.18, you can still access via a proxy the traditional Kubernetes dashboard. Starting with 1.18, it's still there, but it's not installed by default and it's not available. And when you do the AZ AKS browse CLI command, actually what you get is redirected to the Azure portal. So we've basically built similar views to what you get in the default Kubernetes dashboard inside of the Azure portal, so you don't actually ever have to use that dashboard. And I know some people may use it. Nothing stops you from still installing it on cluster nodes if you're running cluster nodes, or you will be running cluster nodes, but you need access to that portal. But there are a large number of alternatives which many advanced Kubernetes users choose to run, and they don't use the built-in or the default Kubernetes dashboard. So that's a change that I certainly fell for just recently when I went through an upgrade from 1.17 to 1.18. And suddenly I no longer had access to the traditional Kubernetes dashboard. So it's a good one to know. The ones that are out in 2024, they're actually up on the Azure Updates website at the moment if you want to go and have a look at them, but they're mostly around services that have already been replaced, that have newer versions available, or have been, basically there's been communication around them already, and basically we've said in 3 years' time, in fact over 3 years' time, about 3 years' time, you'll have to have moved off of them to alternatives or stop using those services. I do like the fact that we chose 29th of February, which is in a leap year. So I'm sure that will cause some people some challenges being 29th of Feb. All right.
All right, cool. The second one is also kind of interesting. And after a long time, then Microsoft miserably decided to not continue with the Service Fabric mesh. And basically, the recommendation is to move even your workload, if it's properly containerized and compatible with the Kubernetes, or go and start with using the Service Fabric managed instances, so that there won't be any continuation with the Azure Service Fabric. Cool.
Yeah.
And regarding the first point you talk about, yeah, definitely if you're working with the Azure AKS, so if you look at the Insight pane, Microsoft is investing heavily in that monitoring and diagnostics and basically that metrics feature inside the cluster. And that Insights feature for the AKS, it's truly, it's way better than the Kubernetes built-in dashboard. So we already started using that one, and their feature and their visibility gives us it's much better.
Yeah, it is. So
cool.
Very busy and noisy audience this evening. So you can post comments on YouTube or Twitter if you are watching this. So please do that. I'm sure folks will have questions in the next section. But Sam, useful links. Let's not forget useful links.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So if you are following the community within Australia, and you definitely know about this new show, which Simon is already started, called New Breakpoint. And basically, it's all about the community and sharing the experience from different teams, even within the Microsoft or from the communities. So trying to keep it short, and it's a good one. It will be broadcasted every Thursday on YouTube live, similar to the same experience which we are having here. And go subscribe to that one. And there are already 3 episodes out. Go watch them, and useful content you will find there every Thursday. Thanks, Simon, for that one. That's a great effort. The second one also is the community newsletter, and that's a reading materials, basically a tailored version of picked items from the community, blog posts, events, or any useful information, with the focus on the development and mainly on the Azure platform, which you will receive monthly. And yep, so we are done for the first part, Azure News. If there's any question, feel free to shoot them out to us, even in the YouTube chat or Twitter. And yeah, let's take a quick and short break, and then I hand over to Simon for our great session with the Logic Apps V2.
All right, we'll start our next session in here. Yep. So we'll post. Asad's asked us to paste the links into the chat. So we'll definitely paste them into the chat for you, Asad. But thanks, Sam. Let's. What I'm going to do is.
I know Simon doesn't need any introduction. Every single of you here knows Simon. But
I don't know about that.
Yeah, Simon is an Azure Pro engagement lead for the New South Wales within the Microsoft Australia, and everybody knows his great effort he's doing with the community and developer community here. Thank you.
All right, no problem. So let me just, I'm going to just quickly grab the links that Asad is asking for. So I have them here to hand. Just bear with me a second and I will get them for you before we kick off this next segment. Let me just add this to the stream. And yep, we'll get them into the chat. So first one is dev community join. So Dev Community Join will take you to our newsletter sign-up page. So you just need first name and email address for that one. It's once a month, comes from my team. It's usually high quality, low fat. We're actually doing really well with that at the moment. I can't tell you how well we're doing, but we're definitely doing very well with it. And then New Breakpoint. So the easiest way to find out about New Breakpoint is to go to just type this in. Is to go to the show log, which will give you access to the previous episodes and who was on. We actually have a show at Ignite next week, which you'll find linked from our most recent show, which was actually this morning with a bunch of folks from our broader developer community, some of whom you would know and are peers of Sam's. So that log file gets updated with each episode, so you'll find each of the episodes listed in reverse chronological order because I'm a developer and why not? Let's do it that way. And the Ignite show next week will be in there as well. So I'm just going to shut up for a minute or so, let everyone take a quick bathroom break, and then we'll kick off in a couple of minutes.
Cool.
So what I might do, Sam, is I might drop you from the stream so you can have a bathroom break and a drink as well, given you've done the first half hour of the show. So I'll hang around on screen, but thanks a lot, and we'll get you back once I'm ready to wrap.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we'll kick off in a couple of minutes. All right, so I can see that we've got a few hardy users watching us on YouTube. So welcome if you're watching us on YouTube. And we did have some folks watching us on Twitter, but no one's on Twitter at the moment, so that's okay. It's all good. Hopefully this channel works for everyone going forward. So my name's not on this slide. We will make a start. But as Sam said, my name's Simon Waight from Microsoft here in Sydney. And tonight I want to talk about the Azure Logic Apps preview that's going on at the moment. So it's a public preview. If you have access to an Azure subscription, you can try out this preview today. It's now available in all regions. And it's an interesting, I wouldn't say pivot for Logic Apps, but it's a re-envisioning of the way Logic Apps are built and the way they run. It doesn't remove the traditional Logic Apps, if we can call them that. They're still a thing in the Azure platform. But I think that with this change, we have a lot longer term flexibility around what we can do with Logic Apps, which is why I called this segment Running Logic Apps Anywhere, which I'm sure as we progress through these slides and the demo, you'll understand why that is. So the Logic Apps preview features, why are we making these changes? So if you've worked with Logic Apps before, you will have been used maybe to have been building them in the Azure portal. A great experience, quite snappy, works well. Downside is you need access to the Azure portal, which is not always possible. Either you're, so I've got a private message here. Let's just see what the private message is, 2 seconds. Okay, yeah, if you don't have access to the Azure portal, that's kind of limiting. Now, you have been able to build using Visual Studio, so the full-blown IDE commercial software version or the community version. But to be honest, sometimes that experience hasn't been the best, and certainly for larger workflows or Logic Apps, it can be a bit of a challenge to get them to work. And there's a range of reasons behind why that is, and there's been a push for a while now, probably for over 2 to 3 years, for VS Code or Visual Studio Code to be enabled as a development platform for Logic Apps. And we do have a sort of a version 1 of that experience in VS Code. It's probably been available for about a year. but really all you had was the ability to hand edit the JSON that sits behind the design surface for Logic Apps, which honestly is probably not a great developer experience. Now, I know some of you out there may be happy to whack away at a big, long, massive JSON, but frankly, I quite like the Logic Apps no-code design, excuse me, design surface experience. So obviously there's been an inflection point at some point where the team has made a decision in order to have that great end-to-end developer experience. We need to think about the way we can enable that scenario to work, and particularly with the Visual Studio Code. The great thing is that with the work that's been put into the preview, there's now a new extension, and you can install it today. Excuse me. You can install it today for Visual Studio Code. So it is actually called the Logic Apps Preview extension. So it'll say Logic Apps and then Preview in brackets. And when you install that, it opens up the possibility for you to try out this experience. Now, you do need to have the Azure Storage emulator installed locally or access to an Azure Storage account that you can point your local machine at to use this. The goal is it will be cross-platform. There are some challenges at the moment with the preview that we'll talk about that means that it's not quite cross-platform yet. But the goal would be that anywhere that you can use Visual Studio Code, you'll be able to design a Logic App locally, which is great. Also, with the way that it's being built, we bring the journey of DevOps and CI/CD or CD for Logic Apps to be a much more straightforward proposition than it has been in the past. Now, you've always been able to extract Logic Apps, to generalize them, to parameterize them, and then do multi-environment deployments with them. But frankly, again, it's probably been more work than a lot of people were prepared to go through to have that experience. With this new developer experience, that becomes a much more straightforward proposition. And when we have a look at it in the portal, you'll start to see some similarities between the way Logic Apps are presented going forward and Azure Functions, which gives you a very big hint as to what enables us to have this new Logic Apps experience. And it's actually the Azure Functions runtime. So the Functions runtime is the thing that is creating our ability to run this locally in Visual Studio Code, because we know we have a great developer experience for Azure Functions today in VS Code. But it also provides us with the ability to run outside of the Azure environment, because we know we can take the Azure Functions runtime and we can run it outside of Azure today, whether it be inside of Kubernetes using the Kubernetes event-driven autoscaler, or inside a container, a Docker container, and run it anywhere we can run a Docker container. With the asterisk being is that we need a storage account that we can phone home to for the purpose of configuration and secret management and logs effectively. So that's kind of at the very core, and you'll see that there is a lot of similarities between the two experiences. All right, next slide. So coming along for this ride is there's a new designer experience. So frankly, it's not a huge amount of difference versus the old designer, but it is more compact, and it means that those larger workflows become less unruly when you're working with them. You have this new idea that the way you do configuration is via this new panel rather than directly in a card. So when you click on the step inside of a Logic App, which we'll see later on in the demo, you no longer kind of get this fly out experience that could in some larger workflows become problematic, and dialogues would show and disappear when you clicked on certain things. Now you have a very consistent panel experience, which works the same way in the Azure portal as it does inside of Visual Studio Code, which is great. So that's functional and it works reliably, but it is still in preview. So the team is going to be doing more work to deliver more capabilities when it comes to the designer. Something that is new with this new preview feature is the concept of a stateless workflow. So if you've used Azure Logic Apps previously, you may have thought about doing something like wiring up a HTTP trigger inside of a Logic App and have that respond to high throughput APIs where you get maybe thousands of concurrent requests or maybe millions of requests in a day. The Logic Apps as they stand, the ones that are the sort of the version 1, they will do that. but they don't do very well at scale because of the way that the underlying orchestrator works with Logic Apps. And you can also run yourself into some difficulty when it comes to the cost associated with doing that with a Logic App. The idea with stateless is that they're much more attuned to becoming those endpoints for high throughput APIs. So basically what they do is they say, okay, well, this type of Logic App is going to be used for this high throughput style scenario. Therefore, we will make some changes to the way it works. And they also have to limit some of the connectors that you can use in those Logic Apps. So where I see something like this new stateless style of Logic App coming into play, and this is just a random thing that I thought of, it's not me talking with any knowledge of roadmap or anything like that, is if you think about Azure API management, at the moment when you design rules in Azure API management, you use some C# code snippets and you embed them inside of API management right there. What about if we took a stateless Azure Logic App and we made that the way that we can actually build and configure rules inside of API management? So we suddenly empower a broader range of people to design and build those rules than we might traditionally, where we had to have that C# knowledge. And I think that's where stateless comes into play versus the stateful workflows, which will still exist, but will be much more attuned to more sort of long-running business workflow style scenarios that are probably a little bit like you would get out of Power Automate Flow, but extracted out of the individual user context. The other thing that I've seen, and this is something that was new to me in going through building my first experience with this new preview, is in Azure now we have the ability to use service accounts. So when you're doing things like configuring connectors, they're no longer done within a user context inside of the Azure portal. You can actually say, I don't want to use a user context. I actually want to use a service principal context. And the benefit to that is that you're no longer having to worry about, how do I marshal this through the environment? How do I ensure all of my connections are using the same user context? Now with the service principal, I can set up a service principal, use it to configure the connectors, and then I can use that service principal for all of my connectors, if that makes sense. And I know that that's not tied to an individual user experience or user account. It's actually running outside of that context, which is a great change in that regard. All right, next slide. So there are some unsupported features, and some of these are during preview, and some of them will remain after the preview. I don't have a breakdown of which ones are which in this particular slide, but there is a link on the next page that will take you to the GitHub repository where this work is being done, where you can see what the current state of things is in terms of what's limited during the preview. So if you've worked with Logic Apps before, you know there's a great get out of jail free action that you can call to actually call an Azure function. So it might be that you can write a solution in 15 lines of code, put it in an Azure function, receive a payload from a Logic App, and then send that payload back to the Logic App or to another Logic App once you've processed it, whereas it might take you 30 actions inside of a Logic App, and it makes no sense to do it in a Logic App. At the moment with the preview, call an Azure function isn't available to you, but what you can do is you can have a HTTP triggered function and then use the HTTP action to actually call that function, which is effectively what's happening underneath the covers with the Azure function, call Azure function capability with a little bit of authentication secret source baked in, but you can achieve the same capability using the Azure functions. Stateless Logic App workflows can only use actions for managed triggers, but they can't use, they can only use actions for managed connectors, but not the triggers at the moment. So that means that you might want to do some processing using a managed connector, but you won't be able to receive data from the source that drives that, or send data to the source at a later point in time, or be triggered by events inside of those managed connectors. Stateful workflows can use both triggers and actions from managed connectors, so there's no change there from what we have with the current version 1 release of Logic Apps. And right now, your deployment scenarios inside of Azure, if you want to take a Logic App that you build locally and deploy it into Azure, You can't use consumption plans for functions at the moment. For that, you have a choice of either using an app hosting plan for functions runtime or a premium plan. So they're the two choices that you have at the moment. So this idea that you can get to purely serverless, only be running when I need it to be running, is not quite there yet because you can't use the consumption plan. But hopefully we'll see that coming in future. Oop, went one slide too far. Demo coming up shortly. There's a known issue, which means that you can't currently use the editor in Visual Studio Code on Linux. There was a challenge with doing it on Mac, but I believe that's been fixed in the interim. And some of the custom connectors like on-prem data gateway triggers and some of the B2B style actions such as flat file aren't currently available. So there is still a reliance when you're building workflows that use some of these connectors. Is you will have to be able to connect to Azure in order to be able to use those connectors, because ultimately what Logic Apps is doing behind the scenes with some of those connectors is it's doing some configuration around API proxies and what have you that you can't replicate locally on your machine. You have to make use of an Azure environment to do that. And we already talked about the Azure Functions via HTTP trigger. So that nice long GitHub link, which I'll post into the comments in a minute, is where you can go and see what the current known issues are with the public preview. And the team's working on resolving and shipping new versions of both the extension and the experience in the portal on a regular basis. And who knows what we'll see next week at Microsoft Ignite. So I don't see any questions in the window at the moment. So what I'm going to do is let's do a demo time. So I think that's what everyone's here for. And I'm just going to hide myself on the screen. Let me just do this to full screen. There we are. Okay, so here we are inside of the Azure portal, and I've already created a nice and simple demo stateful workflow, and we can see I've got the state type over here on the right, over here under that column. If it was stateless, it would say stateless, but me being a developer, I've made it nice and obvious it's a stateful one by naming it that. At the moment, nothing looks too different. Now, this is where things start to look a little bit different, is I now suddenly have code, design, monitor, and trigger histories, and this thing for access keys. Code gives me the raw JSON view behind the scenes, which if you've been using the V1 editor inside of Visual Studio Code, this would be familiar to you. The designer experience was a couple of extra clicks for version 1 Logic App workflows, but at the moment you just have to select it and the workflow loads on screen. So you can see that we have a similar experience in terms of the design to the version 1 workflows, but things are a little bit more compact here. And when we click on these items, we actually get these consistent set of work cards that pop out that we can then edit certain elements through. So it doesn't look too dissimilar to the original Logic Apps, but you kind of get a much more consistent experience, and things like being able to edit your workflows. This would look very familiar to if you're building workflows today using Azure Logic Apps. Where it is different is Monitor now kind of gives you the run history that you used to get in the old portal experience, and Trigger Histories just shows you, when something ran and what the actual result of it was. I suspect we'll see Trigger Histories and Monitor will maybe change over time, and maybe they'll get combined into a single user experience. The other thing I do want to quickly show you is, so this is our Logic App preview type, so you can see it up here in the top left-hand corner. If we scroll through this, we'll see that this looks in many instances very familiar to you if you're using Azure Functions, and there's a reason for that, because it is running on top of the Azure Functions runtime. And so, from a consistency standpoint, the team's aiming to, to give developers that consistency. Where it is different is obviously in Functions, you have functions, and then the individual functions can be listed when you open the function apps, whereas here you have workflows. And then now, rather than building individual Logic Apps, which appear as individual components in the portal, what you can do is, much like you can with function apps, is you can build multiple function apps, multiple logic apps, and they'll be hosted inside of this one logic app container. So let's have a look. Question from the audience. So with Azure Functions hosting model for logic apps, is it finally going to be possible to write unit tests for logic apps? That's a very good question. You have in logic apps already today, and I don't know if it's available as part of the preview. You actually do have the ability to do, I wouldn't say unit testing per se, but you can add actions into your designer to actually generate dummy throughput and dummy code. So let me just see if I can add one of those to show you what I mean there. So what you need to realize is that we're leveraging the functions runtime host as the underlying orchestrator and hosting mechanism for the logic app, but we're not actually changing the way the logic apps are developed and operate inside of that. So if you think about what the logic app is probably doing here, is it's receiving some form of trigger, which in this case would be an event grid event, and then it's triggering the function that the logic app sits in and passing the payload into it. And then it's probably not doing a huge amount beyond that at that point. Realistically, you're not going to have the ability to break each of these steps in your workflow out and unit test them individually. But let's just see. I don't know off the top of my head what it's called. Let's just have a look here. What's it called? I will go away and have a look at it. It's a very good question, though. I appreciate that question. We do have the ability to test. I will need to find what the actual action is called. But if anyone who's on the show or in the audience knows that, feel free to ping it into the chat, and I'll announce it. But certainly I will go away and dig that out after this. So when we have a look at these actions are exactly as they are today. So for this particular workload or for workflow, what we're doing is when an event grid event is raised for a storage account, in this case we're filtering by blob created. I don't have any additional filters on that, so I'm just saying any blob created in this storage account, trigger this workflow. We'll remove that. Let's delete that. We don't need that because that's not going to do anything. Yes. We initialize the variable, so that's just saying create this new variable called new document of type string. We don't assign anything to it. Then I have a call out to Azure Cognitive Services using a computer vision API that I've previously configured. You can see here that I'm connected already, so the connection experience is very much the same as it is today with Logic Apps version 1. I can change the connection and all those sorts of things. The connection objects still show up in the portal. So if we go back quickly to this view of the Logic app, you'll see here that we actually have connections as well. So this is all of our connections to the services that we're using. So we should ultimately see here event grid subscription, our cognitive services connection, and then our Cosmos DB connection, which is still called Document DB, which is the original name for Cosmos when it first launched as just the SQL API. So let's go back to this workflow. Go back into the designer. Excuse the barking dog in the background. It's not my dog, so I can't show them to you. So we're sending, basically we're uploading an image. We're grabbing the image URL, and then what I'm doing is I'm actually affixing a SAS token to it because it's in a private container inside of the storage account. Now, I've done this in a quick and simple way. This wouldn't be the way that you would do it in a production environment because that SAS key will expire eventually. So you would probably need to be doing something other than what I've done here. But just for the purpose of this demo, I've quickly grabbed the SAS key for the particular container, and I'm just concatenating the data URL, which comes from the trigger, which is the URL of the blob that was uploaded. I'm affixing the SAS key to it, and that allows me to then send the URL to the computer vision API, which grabs the image for me and does the OCR and gives me back a blob of JSON. Then what I do to make my life easier when I insert the document into Cosmos DB is, again, there are better ways to do this, but for the purpose of this particular demo, I'm just concatenating a bunch of strings together to build up the JSON, and one of those string components is the blob of JSON that comes back from the computer vision API. And then finally, what we do is we write that into a database or a collection inside of Cosmos DB. So a really simple workflow. Now, I built this one in the Azure portal. At the moment, I can't open it locally inside of VS Code and continue editing it there. But the goal will be eventually that you'll be able to have that two-way experience. Although if you think about what happens with Azure Functions today, if you build them locally and you deploy using CI/CD, you can't then edit them directly in the portal because that's not the way you've deployed them previously. So I suspect that we'll see a similar sort of scenario for Logic Apps, whereas if you author it in the portal, it stays in the portal, and the idea that you might open it locally and edit it locally and push it to the portal probably isn't following best practices. So it maybe doesn't come to that in future, but certainly the ability to open it in VS Code, and we'll have a look at that in just a second. So let's just run a quick demo to this to see, so we can see that working. So I'm just using, here I'm in the Storage Explorer preview view inside of a storage account that's, I've got my event grid event attached to. I've got some sample files here. Come on. So I'm going to grab a picture of a book here. Just going to upload it. So it won't take long because it's only 82K. If we come back to our workflow here and we have a look at the monitor. So that it's already finished writing. So if we open that. And this experience is what you would see today with Logic Apps. So you'll get the nice visual representation of steps that ran and steps that didn't run, and then any steps that have failed and the ability to debug them. So this nice, much simpler, green tick and the amount of time that it took to run. So it only took 0.6 seconds to do OCR. We can still open these individual actions, and it will populate like it does today, the sort of the raw inputs and outputs, so we can see what happened there. And then if we want to go and check our Cosmos database here, we'll just refresh our items table. We'll see that what we've done is inserted a document. So this was the original request from, or the event ID off of Event Grid. Probably not the best thing to use that for an ID, but for the purpose of this demo, again, it'll work. And then the OCR result is just the raw blob coming back from the computer vision OCR API. So, we have the bounding box. So award-winning, Bosch and Ballard, one of the wows, so that wasn't great. The wow's greatest, and it's done a bracket for a C, crime writer. So it's done pretty well, but it's not perfect. It's a novel, Michael Connolly, so that's great. I did upload I'm just going to do one more. I did upload a bit of handwritten text before, which the OCR didn't do a great job of recognizing. So we'll grab that, open that. Upload this. Quickly hop back here. Refresh this. So that already ran. So let's go and see what it inserted into Cosmos DB. So that was one we already had. Yeah, so I didn't do a great job of that one, and that's probably because I didn't tell it was going to receive handwriting for this, or what language it was. So I didn't give it a hint, enough of a hint to help it understand what it was looking at. So that's in the portal. That experience is fairly familiar if you've been working with Logic Apps before. Obviously, as I said, this view of the world where you're now got multiple workflows inside of a Logic App is new, but once you get into the workflows, they actually similar to the experience that you have today. So that's one view of the world. The other view of the world is Visual Studio Code. So I'm locally here inside of VS Code. I have the Logic Apps preview installed, and I know that I have it installed because it's here. It says Logic Apps preview, and I have the functions runtime or functions core tools installed as well, which allows me to build these Logic Apps locally. So I've already gone ahead. I've created a new project, and there's documentation online for this, which I'll provide the link for in a minute. And I've created a new workflow called Local Development Stateful. Now, if I expand this, you'll notice a few things, right? This is very functions orientated. I have a host.json, I have a local settings.json, and then inside of this workflow design time, I have a host and a local settings.json, excuse me, as well, which gives you a hint of how deeply ingrained the functions runtime is in this process. Now, I need to do a couple of things. First of all, when I'm developing locally, I need to say that I want to use not just the built-in connectors that are available regardless of where you run your workflows, but I also want to use the connectors from Azure. So I'm going to do Azure connectors, and I'm going to choose this. So I need to choose a resource group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my, where are we? There we are, there's our Azure Logic Apps demo. And what it will do is it will create those connections for me inside of that resource group. So they'll show inside of that resource group when I go back to the portal and look at them. Now I've done that, what I can do is I can actually open this in the designer, and this will open locally inside of the designer. Okay, so this is a blank workflow. It has nothing in it at the moment. It looks very similar to the portal experience. So let's go ahead and see if we can build the same workflow here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do Event Grid. Choose Azure. There's Azure Event Grid. Okay. So all the actions we have, we want the trigger. So we'll choose when a resource event occurs. All right, so I'm going to type in here. Choose my storage account. And then choose my known test storage account once it loads. Okay, I'm going to filter by just blob created. Okay, so that's fine for that. And then what I'm going to do is I want to create a variable, and I'm going to initialize a variable, call this new document, and it's going to be of type string. I'm going to choose an operation here. I would need to choose Azure for this one, and I want computer vision. Computer vision API. And the action that I want for this is optical character recognition to JSON. Okay, so you can see it's already picked up connection here from Azure because I'm connected to the Azure portal. In the back end, I'm going to choose the image URL. Okay, I need to add the image URL parameter. Okay, and then what I'm going to do here is going to use concat and come back over here, and I want the data object, but what I want out of that data object is I want .url. Now this won't work because I haven't got a valid key for this, so let's just put in a dud SAS key. So I put my SAS key here, just do OK for that. Okay, so at the moment I'm designing locally. I'm not using the Azure portal at all. I'm not proxying the Azure portal to have this experience. It's actually building inside of Visual Studio Code, so super handy for that. And then what we want to do is our next step is we want to set a variable. I'm going to set new document. And then basically what we were doing here is we would do, and for the purpose of this, I'm just going to do a quick concat and need an ID field. And then we want OCR result. We don't have to do this if we didn't want to because it's a NoSQL schemaless database, but because I'm not going to spend ages typing away here, and then we can just do that. So that doesn't really achieve a whole lot. So let's just do this. We'll make the demo in here. And then what we'll do is we'll insert the ID for the event here. And let's put that inside of double quotes as well. So at least we have a bit of dynamic content showing up in there. And then the OTR result would be the blob of JSON that we get back out of here. In fact, let's do this. All right, and then we're going to write that into Cosmos DB. Create or update a document, name of the database, image data. All right, so that's our workflow. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to start debugging. Hopefully everything works at this point. And what we'll do is let's just go back into the portal and we'll disable this one. So let's disable it. All right, so that's disabled. See what's going on down here with our Visual Studio Code. Okay, so it's deleting the universe before it starts the universe. So the functions runtime here is running on top of .NET Core 3, which is why it's doing all of this stuff behind the scene at the moment. While it's just doing that, all right, good. Failed to detect a running fund host. That's fine. That's just because it took too long. Because my machine's doing a whole bunch of work locally, it's just taking a little bit of time to do that. While that's running on the back end, let me just grab this for a second. Just going to grab this down here off screen. The projects are up to date for restore. Okay, so this is still building. All right, let's see if that'll run now. So that should be in a running state. So the question around testing Logic Apps. So this one's for you, Matili. So I just posted a link to Docs, which covers how you can test with static data. So strictly speaking, it's not exactly it's not exactly the unit testing, but it does give you the ability to, you know, test certain components of your Logic Apps. Okay, so let's restore those. All right, while that's building, let's just have a quick. So if you want to find out more about the Logic Apps preview, including a demo exercise, I'm going to post this link as well in the chat. So if you are following on Twitter, you may not see that link. Okay, it worked that time, that's good. Hopefully, it still says it's building. The good thing about the terminal is you can Control-C it. So let's kill that. Yep. Okay, let's try again. Oops. So this time we're not having to clean the whole universe to get this running. Oh, yes, we are. Okay. So it's usually a little bit quicker than this. I've just changed to a new machine recently, so I don't have everything properly set up. So it usually doesn't take this amount of time to run through and run. Usually by now you've got it up and running on top of the function app and responding to requests. So let's give it a little while to go here. Okay, good. Shouldn't need to restore anything. Hopefully this time it'll pop up and it'll be running. All right, well, in the absence of it deciding to come up and run, if we were to have it up and running and we uploaded a file, let's just do that in the background, just humor the demo gods to see if it will actually trigger anything or not. Might as well start with a good demo and then fail right at the end. So let's choose this one, upload this again. Overwrite it because we already uploaded it. Let's just see if we got anything triggered here. No, it's still stuck. All right. Okay. Well, fail is on my side. It's not on the code side. But I can now save. I can save this Logic app. I can check it in. I can do CI/CD with this Logic app. And I can actually run this Logic app anywhere I can get the functions runtime up and running. So what I might do, one last heave ho. Let's just do this. Okay, let's just see. LS won't work here. All right, so let's just do func post start. So rather than rebuilding everything, because it should be rebuilt, let's just see if the functions host will actually start up and run. So I'm cheating a bit here rather than using the full-blown debugger experience inside of Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to try and run it locally to see if it'll actually give me an endpoint that responds and does what it's supposed to do. So last hey-ho, and if this doesn't work, I'll wrap up. Do hang around though, because I do have some stuff to give away, which will be useful for you if you want to come and try this stuff in Azure and you don't have access to Azure yourself at the moment. Okay, doesn't look like it's a happy bunny for some reason. All right, well, I'm too impatient for that. I don't want to give you back some of your evening. So let's just quickly wrap up. So yeah, the Logic Apps preview at the moment, as you can see, the goal is to give you a good developer experience locally inside of Visual Studio Code. I don't know where the status of the Visual Studio full-blown solution support is at the moment, but you can do Azure Functions inside of Visual Studio. So my expectation would be a similar sort of experience might be available inside of Visual Studio. However, the design surface inside of Visual Studio Code lends itself to this graphical layout, unlike the design surface in Visual Studio at the moment. I did say I was going to give some stuff away. I don't have a slide for it. But what I will do is, you can probably guess my name, and you have my Twitter handle there on the screen. If you'd like a $50 Azure credit, and you came along to this evening's live broadcast, so I know at least 3 of the people that are on the show tonight because they've asked questions. Either tweet at me or drop me an email. Pretty easy to figure out. First name dot last name at microsoft.com, and I'll get a $50 Azure Pass into your hand, so you can come and try some of this stuff if you don't have it today. So let me get Sam back on to the stream. Hey Sam, you're on mute. Yeah, that's all right. Don't worry, I've got myself with that.
Thanks, Simon. Really
Right.
great demo and really helpful information. So that's a totally different dev experience, and in terms of the dev and deployment experience, pretty cool. So I've just got the question: what's involved in that build step? So is it just similar to the normal .NET Core build?
So it's basically it's doing all the work behind the scenes for the functions runtime. So it's the same sort of experience behind the scenes to restore all the packages that the functions runtime needs to run. I suspect what's happened with my local machine for this demo tonight is, because I haven't run the functions host in this context before, it's trying to do all the first run initialization, which is why we saw all that stuff going on behind the scenes. I have had this running on my old machine, new machine, on me for not getting it up and running. But if you go in and you actually provision, and we can show you that quickly.
No, I'm asking mainly because of a CI/CD perspective, and
yep.
mainly if I want to hook this up in the Azure DevOps. So are the tooling required? Is it just a .NET Core tooling available at the hosted agents, or because it's in preview, not yet?
So I can't answer that question right now. I could go away and have a look, but what I can say is, if you have a look at the host, the runtime host for this, where are we? So the runtime, this is the workflow design time, and we look at the local settings. You can see that the designer host locally is running on top of .NET. But if we have a look at the runtime for the actual final engine, where are we? Oh, it's also running on .NET. I saw in here somewhere that it was running. There was some node involved in this as well. So you can all look at that, because I'm going to delete all of this stuff after this talk. So if you're looking at that and quickly going away and copying it, it won't be valid in about 20 minutes. So good luck. All right, that's it for me, Sam. So I don't know if you want to say a few words to wrap us up for this evening, and we'll let everyone get on with their evening.
No, thanks, Simon. Thanks again. Really good session. I'm really glad. We are very excited to back with our community, and I think we kicked off really well with this year with the great information and this new preview feature. Thanks everyone for joining us. Don't forget to shoot us some feedback with this new experience of broadcasting live. So we're looking for feedback for improving the experience for the next month and next meetup. So feel free to do that. And as usual, send us any questions we have and watch our space for the next month's meetup. So I think Arafat can confirm, but it must be some AI related, very exciting stuff coming from the AI space for next month.
Don't forget to ask me for those passes as well.
Yes, hopefully.
So
hopefully we'll be there. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap up tonight's stream there. So good evening to everyone. Enjoy your evenings. Hope you've enjoyed the show. As I said, let us know if this works for you. I think we might just do YouTube in future because we've got no one on Twitter at the moment. All right. Thanks everyone for coming to this month's meetup. Thank you, Sam, for hosting this evening. Thanks, Arafat, for being the man behind the scenes, keeping us honest. And we'll see you all again next month, hopefully, with a lot of news coming out of Ignite.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Bye.